The rhythmic swish of Marcus Chen's mop against the polished floors of the quantum research facility kept perfect time with the distant ticking of the wall clock. 11:47 p.m. Another ordinary night shift, or so he thought. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the stars twinkled against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, their familiar patterns a comfort during his solitary work hours. The first sign that something was different came when the security lights in the parking lot flickered. Marcus paused, leaning on his mop as he watched the usually steady LED lights pulse like heartbeats. In the quantum computing lab behind him, the cooling systems hummed their usual song, but something felt off about the air itself, a subtle pressure change that made his ears pop. He wheeled his cart to the window, drawn by an odd shimmer in the night sky. At first, he thought it might be the aurora borealis, unusual for Colorado, but not impossible. But the lights moved wrong. Instead of dancing curtains of color, these were geometric patterns, perfect circles and lines appearing in the starfield like someone drawing on the universe itself. The quantum computer's monitoring systems began chirping urgent alerts. Marcus had learned their different tones over his 3 years working here. This one meant unexpected readings in the quantum field sensors. He'd heard it only once before, when a minor earthquake disrupted an experiment. "This is definitely above my pay grade," Marcus muttered, reaching for his phone to call Dr. Harrison, the lead physicist. Before he could dial, every screen in the facility lit up simultaneously. His phone, the security monitors, even the blank screen of the coffee maker in the break room, all displayed the same message in softly glowing letters. "People of Earth, be not afraid. We offer a choice." The words shifted through languages Marcus recognized and dozens he didn't, cycling in a hypnotic display. Outside, the geometric patterns in the sky coalesced into massive shapes. Ships, he realized with a start. Ships that made aircraft carriers look like bath toys, their surfaces rippling with what looked like liquid metal caught in moonlight. Marcus pressed his hand against the cool glass, his heart pounding but his mind surprisingly calm. The mop lay forgotten on the floor as more ships emerged from what appeared to be tiers in space itself, their exits marked by rings of blue fire that quickly faded. The message on the screens changed, and a figure appeared. Marcus had expected something humanoid, perhaps something insectoid or reptilian from his years of science fiction reading. Instead, he found himself looking at what appeared to be a crystal structure that pulsed with internal light, housed within armor that seemed to bend shadow itself. "I am Vexthor," the being announced, its voice resonating not through speakers, but seemingly directly in Marcus's mind. "Commander of the Krithak Armada, collector of 10,000 worlds, architect of the Great Convergence. Your world stands at a crossroads." The crystal being's next words came with a weight that seemed to press Marcus against the window. "Unlike the others who fought and fell, I offer Earth a unique proposition. One human will be chosen. One wish will be granted through our mastery of reality itself. Choose wisely, and Earth remains free. Choose poorly." The being's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been amusement. "Well, your planet would make a fascinating addition to my collection." Marcus slid down to sit on the floor, his back against the window, the forgotten mop lying next to him like a fallen warrior. Above, the ships arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern that mirrored the atomic structure diagrams he'd seen scientists drawing on whiteboards. As emergency sirens began wailing in the distance, he pulled out his worn notebook, the one where he'd been jotting down fragments of overheard physics discussions for years. "One wish," he whispered, opening the notebook with trembling hands. "We better make it count." The world erupted into chaos within hours of the Krithak's announcement. Marcus watched it unfold on the facility's security monitors, each screen showing a different news channel as he continued his cleaning routine. Old habits die hard, even during alien invasions. The United Nations had convened an emergency session. On screen, delegates shouted over each other in a dozen languages. China nominated their leading quantum physicist. Russia pushed for their military strategist. The United States insisted their chief diplomat should represent humanity. "They're missing the point," Marcus muttered to himself, wiping down the break room counter. He'd spent enough time around scientists to know that the most groundbreaking discoveries often came from unexpected angles. The coffee maker burbled in agreement. The Krithik ships maintained their perfect geometric formation above Earth, their hulls shimmering like oil on water. Every hour, they released clouds of what the media had dubbed starlight dust, swarms of particles that descended through the atmosphere in elegant spirals. Dr. Harrison burst into the break room, her lab coat askew. "Marcus, why are you still cleaning? The particles are about to reach ground level." She grabbed his arm, her eyes wild with excitement. "This is unprecedented. They're scanning every human on Earth simultaneously. The quantum entanglement readings are off the charts." Marcus allowed himself to be dragged to the observation deck. Below, the city sparkled with its usual night lights, now joined by the ethereal glow of descending particles. They moved like schools of fish, sweeping through buildings and people, passing through matter as if it didn't exist. "What exactly are they looking for?" Marcus asked, pressing his face against the glass. The particles reminded him of a theory he'd overheard during one late-night cleaning session, something about quantum consciousness and resonance patterns. "They called it cosmic resonance," Dr. Harrison replied, furiously taking readings with her tablet. "But that's meaningless jargon. It could be anything from genetic markers to neural patterns to—" Oh my! The particles had reached their level. They swirled around the observation deck, passing through everyone present. Marcus felt a slight tingling like static electricity. But instead of moving on, the particles around him began to dance, forming complex patterns that mirrored the diagrams in his notebook. More particles streamed in from other directions, abandoning their previous search patterns. They surrounded Marcus in a spiral of light that reached up into the sky, connecting him directly to the Krithak flagship. Vexthor's crystalline form appeared on every screen worldwide. The resonance is undeniable. Marcus Chen, Night Shift Custodian, Level 3 Security Clearance, has been chosen. The observation deck erupted in chaos. Dr. Harrison's tablet clattered to the floor. Security personnel rushed in, weapons drawn, then stopped, unsure what to do. Through it all, Marcus stood perfectly still, watching the particles mirror the quantum probability patterns he'd sketched in his notebook during countless quiet nights. "This is clearly a mistake," a voice boomed from the doorway. Director Phillips strode in, flanked by government officials. "We have world-renowned scientists, leaders, and diplomats. You can't possibly want a janitor to—" "3 years," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his steady voice. 3 years of cleaning around quantum computers. 3 years of listening to the brightest minds discuss the nature of reality. 3 years of watching experiments unfold and writing down every detail. He pulled out his worn notebook. "Maybe that's exactly what we need. Someone who observes without preconceptions." The particles pulsed brighter, as if in agreement. Through the windows, the Krithak ships shifted, their formation now centered directly above the facility. Vexthor's voice resonated once again. "Marcus Chen, you have 24 hours to present yourself aboard our flagship. Choose your wish wisely, observer of the quantum realm. The fate of your world depends upon it." Dr. Harrison picked up her tablet, hands shaking. What will you wish for?" Marcus opened his notebook to a page filled with hastily scribbled equations and half-formed theories. "First," he said quietly, "I need you to explain everything you know about quantum entanglement, and why everyone thinks it can't transmit information faster than light." The Pentagon's conference room had never seen a janitor's cart before, but Marcus insisted on bringing it. He sat at the massive oak table, his cleaning supplies parked beside him like old friends, while experts from every field imaginable cycled through with their suggestions. "Antimatter weapon schematics," insisted General Hayes, spreading classified photos across the table. "Their ships might be impressive, but with enough firepower." "No," Marcus said quietly, wiping down the surface with his familiar lemon-scented cleaner. The repetitive motion helped him think. That's exactly what they expect. Besides, they conquered 10,000 worlds. You think none of them tried weapons? A Nobel laureate in physics was next. Ask for their unified field theory. With that knowledge, we could catch up to where they already are. Marcus flipped through his notebook. 3 months ago, I heard Dr. Zhang talking about how our current understanding of quantum mechanics might actually be more elegant than we realize. What if we're not as far behind as we think? The experts came and went. Economists suggested unlimited energy sources. Diplomats pushed for galactic alliance treaties. Medical researchers wanted biological immortality. Each time, Marcus listened politely while continuing his cleaning routine, jotting down notes between presentations. During a brief break, Dr. Harrison found him in the hallway. "You're still cleaning," she observed, watching him polish a window. "Even now?" Marcus nodded. "It helps me see patterns. When you clean the same spaces every day, you notice things. Like how quantum entanglement experiments always give cleaner results on humid days, or how the cooling system's vibrations affect quantum coherence differently depending on the moon's phase." "Wait, what?" Dr. Harrison grabbed his notebook. "You've been recording environmental variables. Let me see those humidity correlations." But before she could dive in, another group of experts arrived. This time, it was AI researchers arguing that immortality through digital consciousness would be the optimal wish. Hours ticked by. Marcus's notebook filled with more observations and questions. The cleaning cart's familiar presence kept him grounded as the weight of humanity's fate pressed down on him. During another short break, he found himself alone in the conference room, staring at his reflection in the freshly polished table. "Why me?" he whispered to his reflection. What did they see? The answer came to him while cleaning a coffee stain. He remembered countless nights watching quantum experiments through the laboratory windows, seeing patterns that the scientists, focused on their instruments, sometimes missed. The way entangled particles behave reminded him of ripples in his mop bucket, simple, elegant patterns that followed natural laws. When the next group of experts arrived, Marcus surprised them by asking his own questions. "Tell me about quantum tunneling," he said to a physicist. "Not the equations. What does it look like? What does it remind you of?" The scientist blinked, unused to such questions from a janitor. But as they talked, Marcus's notebook filled with new kinds of notes, not just formulas and observations, but metaphors and analogies that connected different fields of knowledge. As the day drew to a close, Dr. Harrison found him again, this time cleaning the bathroom mirrors. "Marcus," she said, "everyone's betting on what you'll wish for. The running favorite is weapons technology." Marcus smiled, wiping away a streak. "Did you know that sometimes, when I clean the quantum lab late at night, I see tiny flickers in the dark? Like reality itself is breathing. The Krithek ships do the same thing, but they're trying to hold their breath." Dr. Harrison stared at him. "What are you going to wish for?" He closed his notebook, tucking it into his pocket. "I think," he said slowly, "I'm going to wish for them to explain something they've never fully understood. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is admit what you don't know." Outside, the Krithek ships continued their perfect geometric dance, unaware that their greatest challenge would come not from humanity's weapons or technology, but from a janitor who had learned to see the universe in the reflections of freshly cleaned windows. Marcus stood in the Pentagon's courtyard at dawn, clutching his notebook and, against all protocol, his favorite microfiber cleaning cloth. The Krithek transport beam was scheduled to arrive in 2 minutes. Dr. Harrison had tried to convince him to wear a suit, but he'd kept his navy blue janitor's uniform. If he was going to save Earth, he'd do it as himself. The beam wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of a straight column of light, it appeared as a spiral staircase made of crystalline fragments, each step somehow both solid and transparent. As Marcus ascended, he noticed how each fragment reflected not just light, but probability itself, like quantum superposition made visible. Fascinating cleaning implement. A melodic voice observed as he stepped onto the flagship. A being that appeared to be made of living mercury stood before him, its surface rippling with mathematical patterns. I am Guide of Ways. You brought a tool of your profession. Most chosen representatives arrive in formal attire, bearing weapons or devices of measurement. Marcus held up his cleaning cloth. Sometimes the best way to understand something is to wipe away the dirt and see what's underneath. The mercury-like being's surface rippled in what might have been amusement. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Marcus noticed how space itself seemed to fold around them. Doorways led to rooms that were simultaneously larger inside than outside, yet somehow felt more compact. Our mastery of spatial manipulation remains unmatched across known space, Guide of Ways said proudly. We bend reality to our will. Marcus ran his cleaning cloth along a wall, watching how the fabric interacted with the impossible geometry. Interesting. The surface resists like it's pushing back, like you're forcing it to behave this way, rather than working with its natural properties. The guide's ripples became more pronounced. Before it could respond, they arrived at what appeared to be a vast chamber that somehow occupied the same space as the corridor they'd just left. At its center, Vexthor's crystalline form hovered in his dark matter armor. Marcus Chen. The Warlord's voice resonated directly in Marcus's mind. Do you know why we chose you? What this cosmic resonance means? Marcus looked around the chamber. The walls seemed to pulse with contained energy, like a spring wound too tight. I have a theory. You've conquered 10,000 worlds, but you're still searching for something. Something about the way reality works that you haven't quite figured out. Vexthor's crystalline structure shifted, fragments realigning. Bold words from a species that hasn't even achieved interstellar travel. Let me show you something. The chamber transformed, becoming a three-dimensional star map. Each light represents a world in my collection. Each one made the wrong wish. They asked for power, for technology, for weapons that could rival our own. The stars swirled around them, countless points of light representing conquered civilizations. Marcus noticed how the map itself seemed strained, as if the very act of displaying this much information was forcing space-time to bend unnaturally. You have 24 hours, Vexthor announced. Use them wisely. Observe our magnificence. Consider carefully what you might wish for. Remember the fate of your world hangs in the balance. As Guide of Ways led Marcus to his quarters, he continued wiping surfaces with his cleaning cloth, much to the being's apparent confusion. Each touch revealed something new about how the ship interacted with reality. It reminded him of the quantum computer's cooling system back home, working harder than necessary because something wasn't quite aligned right. In his quarters, which somehow existed in 5 dimensions at once, Marcus opened his notebook. The cleaning cloth had picked up traces of energy that formed patterns identical to those he'd observed late at night in the quantum lab. But here, they were forced into unnatural configurations, like trying to force a river to flow uphill. They don't see it, he whispered to himself, sketching new diagrams. All this power, and they're still missing something fundamental about how the universe works. He smiled, remembering all those nights listening to physicists debate quantum paradoxes. Sometimes the simplest questions were the hardest to answer. Sleep proved impossible in quarters that existed in 5 dimensions. Marcus sat cross-legged on what he thought was the floor, though the concept of down seemed negotiable here. His notebook lay open before him, pages filled with observations from his tour of the ship. A subtle vibration caught his attention. Similar to the hum of the quantum computer's cooling system back home, but wrong somehow. He pressed his cleaning cloth against the wall, feeling the energy patterns. The cloth came away shimmering with mathematical sequences that felt familiar. Show me the stars again, he asked the room. The Krithak's automated systems responded, transforming the space into a view of local space. Earth hung below, beautiful and fragile. But something about the display nagged at his mind. He flipped through his notebook to a page from 8 months ago. During quantum teleportation experiments, he'd written, "Particles prefer certain paths, like water flowing downhill." Dr. Zhang said, "We're not moving the particles, we're just revealing where they wanted to go anyway." Marcus stood up, walking around the star display. The Krithek ships maintained their perfect geometric pattern around Earth, but the formation seemed to strain against invisible forces. He remembered something Dr. Harrison had said about quantum entanglement. The universe has preferred ways of connecting things. Fighting those preferences takes enormous energy. "Guide of Ways," he called out. The Mercury-like being appeared instantly, its surface rippling with curiosity. "Your ship's formation. Why this exact pattern?" "It maximizes our control over local spacetime," the guide explained proudly. "By forcing reality to conform to our preferred configuration, we demonstrate our mastery over nature itself." Marcus wiped his cloth along another wall, studying the energy patterns it collected. "Forcing reality," he muttered. "That's the problem, isn't it? You're so powerful that you never needed to understand why things work the way they do. You just push until they do what you want." He opened his notebook to a diagram he'd sketched 2 years ago, showing quantum probability waves during a failed experiment. The pattern of failure had been more interesting than any successful test. It revealed how particles naturally wanted to behave. "Look at this," he said, holding up his cloth to the star display. The energy patterns it had collected formed interference waves with the display itself, creating unexpected harmonies. "Your technology fights against quantum resonance patterns. That's why you need so much power for everything. You're trying to make the universe play music by forcing each note instead of learning the song." Guide of Way's surface churned with complex patterns. "Our methods have conquered 10,000 worlds. Power is its own proof. But what if there's a better way?" Marcus pulled out the page where he'd noted Dr. Zhang's comment about quantum mechanics being more elegant than anyone had realized. "Your ships maintain position by brute force. But look at how galaxies spin. They follow natural quantum flows through spacetime. You're fighting against the current instead of learning to swim." The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. The Krithak weren't looking for advanced technology or powerful wishes. They were searching for something they'd missed, something their very power had prevented them from seeing. They had built an empire on forcing the universe to obey, never realizing that gentler paths might exist. Marcus spent the next hours filling his notebook with new observations. The way the ship's corridors fought against normal spacetime, instead of working with it. How their quantum manipulations ignored natural probability paths. The enormous energy they wasted maintaining artificial patterns that could have been achieved more elegantly by following existing quantum flows. "They're like someone who never learned to swim," he wrote, "but built an incredible machine to push all the water out of their way instead. They're so proud of the machine that they never realized swimming would be easier." As the Earth turned below, Marcus began formulating his wish, not for power or technology, but for something far more valuable. A question that would force the Krithak to confront the flawed in their understanding of reality. He smiled, remembering all the times he'd listened to physicists discuss the universe's deepest mysteries while he mopped their floors. Sometimes the most important discoveries came from simply paying attention to how things naturally wanted to be. The Great Hall of the Krithak flagship defied human comprehension. Delegates from thousands of conquered worlds filled spaces that curved through multiple dimensions, their forms ranging from crystalline to plasma to shapes Marcus's mind couldn't quite process. His simple janitor's uniform stood out among their elaborate ceremonial garb. Vexthor's crystalline form, pulsed with barely contained energy at the chamber center. The dark matter armor around him seemed to absorb nearby light, creating a void that somehow made him more visible, not less. "Marcus Chen of Earth." Vexthor's voice resonated through every mind present. "The time has come. Speak your wish, knowing that its worth will determine your world's fate." Marcus stepped forward, his worn notebook in one hand, cleaning cloth in the other. He felt the weight of Earth's future, but also a strange calm. He'd spent the night connecting dots that had formed over years of quiet observation. "Before I make my wish," Marcus said, his voice steady, "I'd like to show you something." He held up his cleaning cloth, still shimmering with energy patterns collected from the ship's walls. "Your technology fights against quantum resonance patterns. Every corner of this ship strains against the natural flow of space-time." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Vexthor's crystalline structure shifted slightly, fragments realigning. "Our mastery of reality is absolute. We do not bend to nature's whims. Nature bends to our will." Marcus smiled. "Exactly. And that's why my wish is this. I wish for you to attempt to explain, using your most advanced models, why quantum entanglement doesn't violate causality." The hall fell silent. Then, gradually, confused whispers began to spread. Some delegates seemed disappointed, others puzzled. A few, those whose forms suggested advanced scientific understanding, grew very still. Vexthor's crystal structure froze. For the first time, his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "You waste your wish on a scientific question, one that any of our junior engineers could answer." Could they? Marcus opened his notebook. "Because I'd watched quantum entanglement experiments for 3 years. I've seen how particles maintain their connection across space without transferring information faster than light. It's elegant, natural. But your entire technology base fights against these natural connections. You force instant communication by brute force, without understanding why the universe prefers certain paths." The crystalline warlord's form flickered. "Our methods work. That is all that matters." "Then explain it," Marcus pressed. "Not how you force it to work, but why it works naturally. Why can entangled particles maintain their connection without violating causality? What are we missing about space, time, and information?" The Great Hall's impossible geometry seemed to pulse as Vexthor considered the question. Marcus noticed how the ship's structure strained harder against reality when its master was disturbed, like a person tensing muscles they didn't need to use. "A trivial question," Vexthor declared, but his confidence seemed forced. "Our scientists will demonstrate." "No," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. "Not your technological demonstrations. I want the underlying principle, because I think you've never needed to understand it. You're so powerful that you just force reality to do what you want. But the universe has been trying to show us something, and you've been too busy flexing your muscles to notice." He held up his notebook, open to the page where he'd sketched probability waves from failed quantum experiments. Sometimes understanding why something doesn't work teaches you more than forcing it to work. That's what I learned cleaning up after failed experiments. The hall erupted in discussion. Delegates who had dismissed the simple human moments ago now leaned forward, their attention fixed on the confrontation between Janitor and Warlord. In the tense silence that followed, Marcus realized that for the first time in millennia, Vexthor faced a question he couldn't simply overpower. The fate of Earth now hung on a physics puzzle that the most powerful being in known space had never thought to solve. Vexthor's attempt to answer the question transformed the Great Hall into a living demonstration. Quantum probability fields became visible, flowing through the chamber like luminous rivers. The crystalline warlord manipulated these streams with practiced power, showing how his civilization bent reality to their will. "Observe," his voice resonated. "We create quantum channels, forcing entangled particles to maintain their connections across space. Through our power, we overcome light speed limitations and—" "But that's not how natural entanglement works," Marcus interrupted softly. He pulled out his cleaning cloth, now glowing with accumulated energy patterns. "Look at your own ship. Every surface fights against quantum resonance. You're creating tunnels through spacetime. But natural entanglement doesn't need tunnels." The delegate from a silicon-based civilization leaned forward. "The human speaks truth. Our scientists observed similar patterns before our conquest. Natural entanglement follows different rules." Marcus dipped his cloth in a passing probability stream, letting it collect patterns. "Dr. Zhang once said something interesting while I was mopping the lab. She said maybe entangled particles don't need to send signals faster than light, because, from their perspective, they're still in the same place. They're connected by something deeper than space and time. Vexthor's crystalline structure vibrated with increasing intensity. His demonstration began to falter, probability streams bucking against his control. Our method works. We have conquered 10,000 worlds through our mastery of force, Marcus completed. But force isn't mastery. Here, let me show you. He held up his notebook, opening to a page filled with diagrams from late-night observations. These are natural quantum resonance patterns. Notice how they follow existing curves in spacetime instead of cutting through them. The hall's geometry shifted as Vexthor attempted another demonstration. But now, delegates from scientifically advanced civilizations were muttering among themselves, pointing out the strain patterns visible in the probability fields. Your technology, Marcus continued, walking through a quantum stream, is like building a massive dam to redirect a river when you could have just found where the river naturally wants to flow. You're fighting the universe instead of working with it. Guide of Ways appeared beside Marcus, its mercury-like surface showing complex mathematical patterns. But our methods achieve results that natural systems cannot. Are you sure? Marcus lifted his cloth, now shimmering with collected energy. Because I've watched quantum particles achieve exactly what you're forcing, but without all this effort. They maintain connection across space and time without violating causality, without building massive energy-consuming tunnels. The delegate from a plasma-based civilization floated forward. On our world, before the Conquest, we were studying similar phenomena. Natural quantum systems showed efficiency that our technology couldn't match. Vexthor's form flickered violently. The probability streams around him began to writhe as his control slipped. 10,000 worlds. Our power is supreme. Power isn't understanding, Marcus said gently. Look at your own ships. They maintain formation through constant energy expenditure, fighting against natural space-time curves. But galaxies spin without any engines at all. They follow quantum flows that were always there, waiting to be discovered. The Great Hall fell silent as Vexthor's demonstration collapsed entirely. The probability streams, released from artificial control, settled into natural patterns that seemed to sing with mathematical harmony. Marcus watched as his cleaning cloths collected patterns synchronized with these natural flows, creating interference patterns that looked exactly like the quantum resonance waves he'd observed back on Earth. Your civilization is incredibly advanced, Marcus acknowledged, but you've been so focused on proving your power that you missed something fundamental about how the universe works. Natural quantum systems don't need to be forced. They're already connected in ways we're just beginning to understand. Vexthor's crystalline structure had grown still, his dark matter armor reflecting the natural quantum patterns that now filled the chamber. For the first time in millennia, the mighty Warlord faced not just a challenge to his power, but to his entire civilization's understanding of reality itself. The Great Hall of the Krithak flagship had transformed. Where forced geometric patterns once dominated, natural quantum flows now created ever-shifting mandalas of probability and light. Delegates from 10,000 worlds watched in silence as their conqueror's crystalline form pulsed with new understanding. 300,000 years. Vexthor's voice resonated softly. We achieve mastery over reality itself, yet never stop to ask why particles choose to dance together across space and time. His dark matter armor had shifted, no longer fighting against quantum resonance but flowing with it instead. Marcus watched the patterns with his cleaner's eye, noting how the ship's structure seemed to relax, like tense muscles finally releasing. His cloth, still shimmering with collected energy patterns, now harmonized with the natural flows rather than fighting them. Your wish, Vexthor continued, was not for power or knowledge or weapons. You asked us to explain something we had never truly understood. In doing so, you revealed that our mastery was incomplete. The delegate from the Silicon civilization floated forward. On my world, before the Conquest, We had begun to observe these natural quantum harmonies. We were studying them, learning their rhythms. Until we arrived, Guide of Ways completed, its Mercury surface showing complex patterns of regret, and imposed our methods through force. Marcus opened his notebook to its final pages. Dr. Harrison once told me that the best scientists are like careful janitors. They clean away assumptions to see what's really there. Maybe that's why you chose me. I spent years watching how quantum particles naturally behave, without any preconceptions about how they should act. Vexthor's form shifted, crystalline fragments realigning into a more harmonious pattern. The choice is clear then. Earth will not join our collection. Instead, his form expanded, addressing all present. We propose an alliance, a new kind of empire, not of conquest, but of understanding. The Great Hall erupted in discussion. Representatives from thousands of worlds, each with their own scientific traditions and observations, began sharing notes. Natural quantum patterns from different sectors of space overlapped, revealing deeper harmonies that the Krithak's brute force methods had obscured. Return to your worlds, Vexthor commanded. Not as conquered subjects, but as partners in discovery. We have much to unlearn and even more to understand. 1 month later, Marcus pushed his cleaning cart through the newly established Quantum Harmony Research Center. The facility, built where the old quantum lab had stood, now hosted scientists from across the galaxy. His badge identified him as both head janitor and senior observer of natural phenomena. Dr. Harrison looked up from a workstation where she was collaborating with a plasma-based being on new quantum communication theories. Marcus, you won't believe what we've discovered about particle entanglement. It turns out. Let me guess, he smiled, pulling out his ever-present notebook. The particles aren't sending signals through space at all. They're following natural connections that were always there. The plasma being pulsed in agreement. Your species' insights are remarkable. You discovered through simple observation what we missed with millennia of advanced technology. Marcus dipped his cleaning cloth in a quantum probability field monitor, watching the patterns emerge. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from paying attention to what's right in front of you. Speaking of which, he pointed to a subtle fluctuation in the field. You might want to adjust your containment parameters. The quantum resonance is trying to follow a more natural path. As he continued his rounds, Marcus smiled at the sight of human and alien scientists working together, each bringing their unique perspectives to understand the universe's deeper rhythms. Outside, the Krithak ships still hung in Earth's orbit, but their formation had changed. Instead of forcing geometric patterns, they now flowed with space-time's natural curves, like leaves floating on a cosmic river. His wish hadn't just saved Earth. It had transformed an empire of force into a civilization of understanding. And it all started with a janitor who learned to see the patterns in the quiet moments between the cleaning of floors and the dreams of stars.